Hello everyone, welcome to StudyTravel TV Live, a show of news, statistics and opinion. I'm Matthew Knott, news editor of StudyTravel Magazine.
Hello everyone, I'm Joshua Walton, staff journalist of StudyTravel Magazine. Before we get started, for the best viewing experience, please put the call in side-by-side speaker view. You'll see an icon in the top right corner where you can select the view.
We are delighted to welcome you all today to the latest episode of StudyTravel TV Live. In today's broadcast, we'll start with a news story and then we'll be joined by our guest this week, Paolo Barilari, President of FELCA, Vice President of Italian Agency Association ALTO and Director of Lingua nel Mondo Agency, and Reka Lenart, Association Manager of the Association of Language Travel Organizations, or ALTO.
We'll then introduce a few more stories as we go through the show. If you have any questions for the presenters or guest speakers or comments on the stories, please post them in the chat box and we'll read them out at the end. A big thank you to the sponsor of this episode, Londonist.
Okay, so let's have a look at our first story. And we'll begin with a story that involves both of our guests today. The Association of Language Travel Organizations, assisted by FELCA, has released the findings of its latest ALTO Industry Pulse survey, which was conducted in the fourth quarter of 2021 and was completed by 183 organizations.
The survey shows that many organizations are starting to hire again, with just over 50% expecting to increase current staffing levels by June 2022. And a further 35% expecting to remain at current numbers.
A degree of stability was also shown in business operations. 63% said that they would survive at current levels of revenue for the next 6 months without any need for government support or restructure, an identical ratio to the previous quarter and an increase compared with 51% at the beginning of last year.
Organizations predicted the June to August 2022 period for the industry returning to half of pre-pandemic business, with an average of 54% of revenue expected then, compared with 2019 levels. Language schools were slightly more optimistic than agencies for this period.
Okay, so at this point, we'd like to introduce our guests, Paolo and Reka.
I am.
Hi, Reka. I can't.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
Hi, there we go.
Hi there.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, hi. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so Reka, if we could begin with you, the findings on companies in the industry hiring again were a very pleasing element of the ALTO survey. You presented the overall statistic in the report. Was this fairly consistent for both agencies and language schools, or was there a clear difference between the two?
Well, I think the first thing to remember about this slide, or the fact that companies are looking at an increased hiring strategy in the next few months, is the previous survey in the question, which was asking companies about the number of staff reduction or increase in the previous 6 months, and there was a significant decrease, the loss of staff members, basically 63% on average, that companies had to say goodbye to. And I think that this 51% is a bounce back and not even coming back to the same level. But since you asked me this question, I looked at the broken down figures, and the 51% increase is driven more by schools, because when you look at the agency and school figures, agents, only 45% of agents selected the answer, I'm planning to increase the number of staff, and 61% of schools So it's a lot more coming from the agency side going forward.
Probably they need thinking about sort of teaching staff for the summer, I would imagine.
I think that they kept the key staff members only, especially when the funding schemes ran out, and now they're desperately trying to get back to pre-COVID levels, because they're bracing themselves for a hopefully really busy summer period.
Thank you. And Paolo, are EALCA agencies hiring staff again from what you've seen, and how much of a challenge will it be to replace the experience and talent that was lost during the pandemic?
Yeah, well, very good questions, very good points. I mean, in Italy, we are the major market for a lot of countries. I mean, we're number one. We used to be number one in the UK, in Ireland, and Malta, and also Spain. And of course, we hope that next summer will be a good summer, and we have to hope that, because I mean, it's been 2 tough years. We also know how to deal with COVID, don't we? I mean, we know that it's more periodic. In the summer, it's better. This will be the 3rd summer, yes, with COVID. So I mean, we know how to deal with it, and the agencies are hiring staff. You know that Italian agencies are very much based on part of the business, which is school groups. And this is not taking off again, it's not picking up. And until the 31st of March, the Italian schools, the state schools, they cannot organize trips abroad. So we really hope that April, May, and June will be good months for that. But definitely, Italian agencies are hiring staff. Don't forget that agencies often, they have less staff than schools. That's why maybe we are hiring less, and also we are maybe less optimistic than the schools, because we are more careful, but we really would like to see the market booming in the summer.
Thank you. It might be worth mentioning at this point that organisations can post vacant positions on the StudyTravel network for free. So just look for the jobs tab under the network drop down for anyone that wants to do that. So Paolo, FELCA has been assisting on the gathering of agent responses for the ALTO industry pulse report. And in gathering these, were there any other findings that weren't published in the report that you could share?
Yeah, first of all, I must thank you very much, Reka and ALTO, because this joining survey is very important. So there is always a part dedicated to figures and statistics, and there is a part for the agents, a little bit focusing on some arguments, some issues, some topics. What we noticed, not in this particular survey, the last one, but in a previous one, that the agents are very keen on working on something that will stabilize the market. I mean, we've been accustomed, as usual, to work with schools in a very good relationship terms. But what happened with COVID made us think that we should also have something more structured. So the 2 points that with the surveys of ALTO, we realize it's very important to think about the payments methods and some points in the contracts that will help both schools and agents to have a solid and safe relationship. This is number one. The second thing is that ALTO is sending us these reports, but it's also sending the reports divided into regional areas. So any FELCA association from any country of the FELCA associations can ask for their individual report. So having a picture of their country, that is very important.
Thank you. The business projections in the report were made before Australia, New Zealand and Japan announced reopening plans, and there has been an easing of entry measures in several countries since the survey was conducted. The UK has also announced that all COVID protection measures will be dropped, but this week Russia has telegraphed it is willing to take military action in eastern Ukraine. There is an ALFI summer schools taking place in Rome in 4 weeks, and there are several agents from Ukraine, Russia, Moldova and Kyrgyzstan who have booked to attend. Although now they are telling us that travel from these regions is in doubt. Paolo, have we jumped from one crisis into another, do you think?
Unfortunately, I think that you're right. We're moving from COVID to this Russia-Ukraine crisis. It is a potential war it's not good news. I mean, not only for the business, but for everybody, for human lives and the life of in these countries. I mean, our business is so sensitive to many things, but a war over a situation like this, it's really affecting everything. I think about our business. I think about the situation of people in Russia and Ukraine and all our friends, agents mostly, in those countries. I think, I mean, having war as a solution to problems, I mean, I think it's very primitive. And our industry is completely the opposite. We are international. There are no boundaries, no differences. I mean, for once, politicians, they should take the example of our industry to deal with problems and situations.
Reka, have you heard from your ALTO members in the region about this?
Well, I agree with Paolo that you know, you would have thought that we learned some lessons from after this devastating pandemic that affected the whole of humanity. That once it looks like we're coming out of one big mess, we're not stepping straight into the next one. I do really hope that it's more about flexing muscles than a real war developing. But nevertheless, it's just as Paolo said, our industry is so sensitive to any kind of disruption and any sort of bad news emerging from any corner of the world that it's not gonna be a welcome development. ALTO members, we actually have a conference coming up in Rome, but as far as I'm concerned, those Russian members that are registered to participate are based in other countries as well. So I imagine that, you know, to our specific event, it's not going to cause any problems. But of course, our members in Russia, I'm just hoping that they will be able to resume their normal business operations after COVID and not having to deal with politicians throwing out the toy from the sandbox.
Let's hope so. Okay, let's move on to our next story, and it's a major development in the language travel sector, and indeed one that was the most read news story of the last week on the StudyTravel network. ILSC Education Group and ELS Educational Services have announced a merger, and along with Berlitz Corporation joined the newly formed Language Education Holdings, creating one of the largest groups in the sector.
NSA Holdings, the Japan-based former owner of ELS and Berlitz, announced the sale to ILSC Holdings, a subsidiary of Language Education Holdings, for an undisclosed fee, and investors include education-focused private equity firm Quad Partners and the management team and founders.
The combined group will comprise of 375 language teaching centres in 70 countries, including the 15 ILSC schools in Australia, Canada and India, and 12 ELS centres in the USA, which are focused on teaching international students.
The merger represents a return to the USA market for ILSC. Paul Schroeder, CEO of ILSC, told StudyTravel Magazine that the combined ILSC-ELS brand had significant market share in 3 of the top 4 ELT destinations worldwide, and that they will be looking to establish a presence in the other, the UK.
Okay. Reka, there was a question in the ALTO Pulse survey on whether respondents expected to see more or less schools and agencies in the sector after the pandemic, and whether there would be more consolidation in the sector. What were the findings there?
Well, when hearing this news and reading this news story, my first thought was that, you know, we read this story in 2 minutes, and there must have been a huge amount of work and, you know, negotiations going into a merger like this. And, you know, congratulations to all parties involved there, all ALTO members. So really happy for this merger to happen. The survey data came in obviously before this happened, but it's something that we've been discussing. The consolidation of the industry is something that we've been discussing at ALTO meetings for several years. It's not new, but as with so many things that I think are affecting our businesses, the pandemic has played as a sort of catalyst or something just to sort of speed up the process of events that were already happening. 69% of the survey respondents said that they think there will be less agents after the pandemic, and a further 16 said that this was going to be thanks to the creation of larger companies. And 68, so very similar, 68% said that there would be less schools in the future, and a further 19% said that it would be because of the formation of bigger change and education groups. And I think that it's not only agents forming alliance and schools, but you can see the combination as well now with Kaplan and ESL, or education groups that represent both agencies and schools as well. We will see. I think it's a welcome news because it will make the industry more professional and more organized. And we need all kinds of players of all sizes to make it a really diverse industry.
Thank you. And Paolo, the mergers and acquisitions are more visible on the language school side of the sector rather than with agencies. Over the past 20 years, have such school mergers been good for our industry?
Yes, you're right. I mean, it's more visible, this aspect with schools than with agents. And I think the agents have been always smaller than schools in general. I like and I welcome consolidation up to a certain grade. I think when there will be just a few players ruling a huge market share, maybe this is not so good. I mean, we see that with big companies from the Silicon Valley, these big platforms, when someone is just ruling a huge market share, this might not be the best solution. I mean, of course, it's important, consolidation, it's important for the industry. We don't have to forget that smaller schools and smaller agents can provide the same quality, sometimes even better quality than bigger groups. And the fact that Reka was mentioning having together agents and big agents and big schools in the same group, it is something that happened even in the past. I would ask, just maybe I'm not being diplomatic here, but I might ask how an agent being part of a group with schools can be objective. I mean, my role is to counsel the student in the best way. Sometimes maybe the school in my group is not the best solution for my student. Maybe not diplomatic enough, but that's what I think.
Well, I think it's what the market needs. So obviously, if there wasn't any need for the services provided by these schools or by these agents, then they perhaps, after a while will not exist.
Great,
no comments from me. It's okay.
Thank you. Let's take another story. Next up, we'll focus on borders and travel restrictions, as there have been some relaxations in a number of destinations in recent weeks. Perhaps most significantly, Japan has announced that it will reopen its borders to international students from March the 1st. And will shorten quarantine periods from 7 to 3 days, or possibly nothing, depending on the vaccination status and country risk level.
The international education industry in Japan has cautiously welcomed the reopening, but highlighted that a daily entry limit of 5,000 arrivals, which will include Japanese nationals, will create a significant backlog, given that there are reportedly more than 150,000 students waiting to enter Japan.
Elsewhere, Western Australia has confirmed that it will allow fully vaccinated international passengers to enter from March the 3rd without the need for a quarantine. Until that date, the state is allowing already enrolled international students to enter.
And in Europe, Germany has removed several countries, including Spain, the UK, and the USA from its high-risk list. The Netherlands will remove quarantine requirements from next week. Switzerland has removed all entry requirements, and France has eased measures for EU citizens and vaccinated passengers from non-EU green and orange countries.
Okay, Paolo, do you think these changes and others that have recently been announced for places such as Canada and the UK could have been implemented much sooner?
No, I don't think so. I think that a certain level of prudence is important, and a certain level of being careful. It's very important, because I remember, for example, here in Italy, where I live, that we lifted up some restrictions earlier, and then we went back to the situation as it was before. So I think it is okay to go slowly on this path, but it's very much needed, all this lifting up the restrictions. And I believe that this summer will be much better than last one.
And another question for you, Paolo, is the capacity and infrastructure in place to deal with a possible boom in bookings, do you think? For example, in-flight routes, seat availability, school capacity, and homestay availability, an issue we discussed on our last show 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, yes, of course, flights are necessary to our business. And we go back to Russia and Ukraine. Now Ukraine said that nobody can, of course it's a precaution, nobody can fly over Ukraine. Imagine something like that, or hopefully not, but a critical situation there. A lot of flights should be diverted. And so flights are important, and also the prices of the flight tickets that I noticed that they went up a bit, and also availability of host families. Yes, I'm a bit worried about that, Joshua.
Reka, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we're actually due to have a members sort of catch up online next week, and I think that this will be one of the questions. We sometimes have conference sessions, which basically just means that people who turn up at the event can bring their questions, and whoever gets the most interest will be discussed. So I think this is one of the topics that would be perfect there. I agree, even from personal point of view, when you're trying to travel somewhere, you can just see that the number of flights have been reduced, the price has gone up, so there will be a lot of difficulties when we're trying to get our lives back on track.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to our next story. Tourism associations in the UK, including English UK and the British Educational Travel Association, or BETA, excuse me, have called for a new group travel scheme for European juniors, amid concern that the implementation of mandatory passports and the end of the list of travellers scheme will prevent European school groups from choosing the UK.
BETA commissioned an opinion poll that found that members of the British public were in favour of a scheme that would facilitate group travel and extending biometric ID card travel until 2025.
Stakeholders have commented that there is a twofold issue: that some young learners may not have a passport, and that the cost of obtaining one would be expensive and time consuming, but also that non-EU children resident in EU countries may not be able to get a passport and may require a visa for the UK. France-based Go and Live group, which includes NASL, said group leaders would not organise trips that might differentiate some members of the class.
Pino Fotti, president of Italian agency association EALCA, told StudyTravel Magazine that school group travel from Italy is due to recommence from the spring, and that currently many school group inquiries in preparation for that are for Ireland and Malta.
So Paolo, can we ask you to wear your vice president of EALCA hat for a moment? Italy is by far the largest source country for the UK's language school sector traditionally, as you mentioned earlier. Does BETA have a valid concern here about group travel? And if so, what percentage of groups do you think Italian groups might be diverted to other destinations?
Yeah, I do believe so. And this happens already. As I told you, until the end of March, there won't be so many groups traveling from Italian state and private schools. But for the, requests we are receiving right now for trips organized in April or scheduled in April, May, and maybe early June, we already see that many schools are choosing Ireland and Malta because of a few things. Number one, needing a passport. Number two, some of these groups are European Union funded, and the feeling is that it should be nice to send back the money that we receive from the European Union to a European Union country as Malta or Ireland. And also there is a psychological effect, I think. It is not nice to receive a message that an ID is not valid any longer, is not enough any longer, when we traveled with an ID since 1973, perhaps. So it's like, slamming the door in front of groups wanting to visit Britain, loving Britain. The UK has been always number one in our dreams. So it's a bit of pity that something might be changing.
Thanks. And Reka, has this issue been discussed within ALTO?
Another one for next week, but again, you would think that after a devastation of the pandemic, people would be concentrating on how to get back into, how to ease things for the businesses, and not how to create sort of bureaucratic difficulties for them. I do feel that it's more of a psychological reaction from the European school groups, because and in the short term, it's definitely going to move some of the groups to Ireland and Malta, where it's just easier, and then they might up their game. I was just thinking about this when I was going through your questions, that the Irish and Maltese schools have a big chance of establishing this as a long-term. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's a short-term effect, just a sort of, oh my God, we need a passport, and gradually the UK will be a leading destination again. But there is a danger that other countries keep the gained extra students for themselves. We'll see.
Thank you. Paolo, the extension of ID card travel in the UK, excuse me, until October 2021 was actually supposed to be a concession for the UK ELT sector after Brexit. But as we know, 2021 never really happened for group and junior travel for our sector. So do you think the UK government should offer an additional extension on this as a compromise?
They might reconsider, as you said, the fact that 2021 was not a business year. Maybe the measure in place there was not useful at all. So maybe just extending this idea to allow with the ID card to travel and to enter the UK to 2022 would be a great help. Yeah. And I agree with Reka, if I can add something, that it will be this diverting people and students from the UK to Ireland and Malta will be temporary. Also because Malta is a small island, welcoming the small island is a bit bigger but small. Not everybody from Spain, France, Russia, and Italy can move to Ireland and Malta without sinking the islands, actually, with students.
Thank you. And we'll finish with one more story. Towards the end of last year, we reported on the launch of ALTO's best practice guidelines, which were produced after a long consultation period with agencies, language schools, and other stakeholders in the industry.
And around the same time, we announced that FELCA and the International Association of Language Centres, or IALC, were discussing the potential for a global contract and escrow deposit accounts to provide greater protection for the industry. We understand that FELCA and IALC are now in conversation with ALTO about maybe adopting the best practice guidelines as a voluntary best practice for their members.
The ALTO best practice guidelines cover areas such as preliminary diligence, contracts, agent-student agreements, payment terms, repeat and direct bookings, and corporate social responsibility.
Paolo, what more can you tell us about this?
That I think this is the breaking news of the afternoon, actually. And yes, we were having panels. We actually met 5 times at least, a selected group of YALC representatives from schools and FELCA representatives from agents, and we were discussing 2 topics, escrow account and global contract. And all of a sudden from ALTO became this very good document, these best practices, that was actually what we really needed. So Reka can tell you about how long it took to produce such a good document. And the normal move was, the most natural move was that we put everything together and we push and promote these best practices all together, trying to make as many schools, as many agents as possible accepting and adopting these best practices.
Thank you. And FELCA, YALC and ALTO would have a collective membership of close to 1,000 companies. Do you think that would give the best practice guidelines a critical mass in terms of visibility, Reka?
Yes, I mean, ALTO is a natural platform when it comes to agent-school relationships and cooperation. And I think that we were a perfect platform to start rolling the ball on this. And this is the point where I would mention the time and effort put into this project by ALTO member agents and schools. Not to mention the ALTO board, the fantastic members of the ALTO board who always have their minds on how to drive projects that will benefit the industry as a whole. Bringing FELCA and YALC into the picture is going to add a much greater exposure to the project, and I think that this is something that we definitely need, and we will be discussing it with the board, between the ALTO, FELCA and YALC board members, how exactly we could give this the biggest push. Being guidelines, obviously, these are thoughts that we put together as a almost like if you would like to follow them, we think that you're going to be fine. You don't have to. We don't make these, even for ALTO members, the best practice guidelines are not compulsory at this stage. Rolling it out to the industry is going to be great because we can start testing it. People can start using it. People can start refer to it. The more agents ask schools about it and vice versa, I think we might make small changes in there. And then eventually we plan to perhaps bring this in as a code of conduct for ALTO members, but this is long. We are a long way away from that. The exposure that the YALC and FELCA membership is going to bring to the document is fantastic news, and I think we're going to be a great team on this. Paolo, what do you think?
I think, as I told you, this is breaking news, and I think it's not compulsory, but it will be something that when we meet during these B2B meetings and workshops and shaking hands and say, oh, by the way, you know that we follow the best practices from ALTO and we are FELCA or we are YALC. This will be like recognizing and each other as part of a group or a club that will be larger, bigger and bigger, larger and larger, that they agree on how to conduct business in a fair way. And I think this is what we really needed.
And just historically, I mean, the reason why this document came about was the need from schools and agents to have a sort of common understanding of how we should conduct business. Obviously, again, the catalyst was the pandemic, when a lot of issues came out, cancellations, vouchers. I don't want to go into it, but we've had not only amongst our members, but we had open discussions in the industry with panel discussions about what are the issues within our industry that both agents and schools agree on, what are the issues that we should discuss and come to a closer common understanding. And this document is the result of that 2 years of discussion. So again, news, and you read it in 2 minutes, but what went into it was a quite complex negotiating process. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's the end of the show.
Thank you. Before we move on to any questions from the audience, Paolo, perhaps you would like to tell us what else FELCA has planned for the coming months.
Yeah, a few things. Number one, we will be celebrating the 25th year of activity of FELCA. So this is the 25th anniversary, and for sure we will celebrate it probably at Alfie London. So be ready and book for us a big room and a lot of champagne. And second thing is that you all know that we as industry, we have done a lot during these terrible times. And we would like to communicate more to our individual members. So for the first time, FELCA will have a global Zoom meeting, inviting all the agencies. So the 700 agencies should meet. Of course, not everybody will have the microphone on, but I mean, we would like to tell them about what we have done, the 25th anniversary, and introducing these best practices guidelines from ALTO. And so this is the big news, that we will have regularly, maybe twice a year, this global Zoom meeting by FELCA, and the first one will be within March, before the end of March. And what else? Nothing. I mean, it's just trying to have more national associations within the FELCA group. And we have got Mexico on board, and we are super happy about that. And probably we would like to have more members from South America. We already have Brazil, Argentina, and Mexico. We are planning to push or to attract Ecuador, Bolivia, and Chile. So the more the better.
Excellent. And Reka, as you mentioned earlier, ALTO will be hosting its first face-to-face conference for some time in April in Rome. What can you tell us about that?
Yes, we've been waiting for 2 years to go to Rome, and the ALTO conference is a 2-day leadership event that is open to members and non-members as well. It's attracting senior leaders from international education organizations, be it from agents, schools, other associations or service providers that are part of our industry. And we will have, it's a quite intense 2-day program with lots of professional development, networking. We have industry panel, roundtable. It usually builds really strong relationships between participants, because you not only have the opportunity to talk about courses or commissions or sort of specific details about your business, but you will find out how your partners are running their businesses, or what their ideas about innovation, and you just have a sort of deeper mutual understanding about how your partners and even your competitors run their businesses, and we learn a lot from our speakers as well as from each other. Highly recommended. Great venue, city, and it's going to be a brilliant crowd of people who survived and look forward to building on a better industry together.
I really hope I will get an invitation. Who knows?
It's in the mail. It's in the mail, Paolo.
Best of luck. Best of luck with the event.
Thank you.
And that brings us up to date with all the latest news in the industry. At this point, we'll completely open up to the audience to see if there are any questions for our guests or for the StudyTravel team. These can be on any of the stories or topics we have discussed today. And do please make sure that your organization and your name are in the Zoom name or in the question that you post in the chat.
It doesn't look like there are any questions in there at the moment, just a couple of comments. We've got Mauro from Emerald. Nice to see you, Mauro. And thank you very much for the interesting contributions. And Nicola Lutz and FELCA's 25. Brilliant work. Time for a party there, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't look like we have any questions.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, please.
The Rome conference is from the 22nd to the 24th of April. So I forgot to mention a very important detail, and you can find all the information on our webpage. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so well, that brings us to the end of this week's StudyTravel TV Live. Our next episode will be on Wednesday, the 9th of March, at the same time of 4 p.m. GMT. Visit the StudyTravel TV Live page on the StudyTravel Network, which you can find under the magazine section in the menu. And on that page, we'll be announcing the guest speakers for the next broadcast. And you can find a recording of this episode and all the past episodes as well. So that's it for today. We'd like to say a big thank you to our special guests. Paolo, thank you for your time and insights today.
Thank you.
And Reka, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. We look forward to seeing you both again very soon.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye, everyone.
And thank you again to our sponsor this week, Londonist. And thank you to everyone for watching. Goodbye. Have a great week.
Goodbye.
Bye.